Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, good.
All right, well, we'll call the meeting to order then. We'll do the pledge quick. I pledge allegiance to
Allegiance to the flag
the United States of America
and
and
to
to the
the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And for roll call, let the record reflect that all members are present, and we will go directly to you, Barb.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to join you virtually. So thank you very much for that. My name is Barb Dorn. I'm the Director of Leadership Development and Executive Search here at MSBA. I spend all of my time in superintendent search and superintendent evaluation. So as you know from the email I sent you, my goal tonight is really just to provide you with information so you can make an informed decision about what's next for Royalton Public Schools. And I want to be sure I answer every single question you might have so that you can make the right decision for your students there in that district. One thing that would be really helpful for me, if you wouldn't mind, is just a real quick round of introductions, maybe just your name and how long you've served on the Royalton board.
Yep. Want to start?
I am Maria Trout, and I am serving in my third year, right? Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
I'm Ryan Hofstad. This is my 5th year.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Randy Hackett. This is my 11th year.
Okay, thank you.
Ellie Holm, this is my first year.
Did you say Kelly?
Ellie.
Ellie?
Yep, Ellie.
Okay, great. Thank you. And your first year? Great. Thank you, Ellie.
Hey Barb, John Andrews, first year.
All right. Thanks, John.
Lucas Boyd, 3rd year.
Lucas, 3. All right. Thank you. 2, 3. 6-member board, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it. So I always ask how many have been through a superintendent search before, and I know that Randy, you have, correct?
Yeah.
And Ryan, how about you? Were you on the board for the last search?
Yep.
Okay. Lucas or Maria, were you on the board at that time?
No.
Okay, so 2 of you have been through a search before, and the rest have not. All right, so I think there's
Ellie has too.
Ellie has 2.
Ellie has also. She served a previous term, so.
Okay, so 1 year on this board, but you'd been on the board previously, so Ellie has been through it as well. Okay, great. Half of the board, wonderful. There's 2 good things I see when I look at this list of introduction. One is that you've got a nice blend of people who've been on the board for a while, as well as some real new eyes. I think it's a good combination where you're looking for leadership, that the elected representatives really bring forth experience from being on the board a while. And you've got people from 5 years, 11 years, and also people that are brand new so that they can look at things from a different angle, perhaps, than people that have been there for a while. So that bodes really well for you. Also, I think the fact that half of the board has been through a search and half has not is also a really good thing, because there's no expectations that anyone has exactly how things are supposed to go. So those are both good things. What I'd like to do with the agenda, I'm assuming maybe you have seen that or have it in front of you. I just sent a very rough agenda. Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to keep the conversation really informal. So this is just an outline of some of the things I think it would be helpful to share with you. But I don't want to stick exactly to this if we want to go out of order, because that's where the conversation goes, or you have questions, please just interrupt me. I can't see all of you at the same time, so I can't see you doing this all the time, but just interrupt me if you have a question. I want to make sure I'm answering it as we go along. So don't wait till the end to feel like you have to ask anything. Does that sound okay with everybody?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. So the first thing I do want to talk about is there are 2 kinds of interim searches. There's a search for a superintendent, and then there are searches for interim superintendents. We are at the tail end of search season this year. So most districts right now that are starting up looking for someone are looking for an interim, someone to keep the wheels on the bus for the coming year, and then maybe launch a search next year in December, January, February. So you have a little bit more of the luxury of time. That doesn't mean that's what you have to do, however. You could certainly post for the position of superintendent and do a very condensed search. You'd be doing about 3 months worth of work in 3 weeks. It can be done. I don't recommend it only because it's exhausting and you have a lot of meetings that you would need to be at, and you have very little time for stakeholder input from the community, from staff, etc. if you condense it down and try and do it between now and the end of June, because you do need a licensed superintendent on July 1st. The other option then is the interim, which is where most people are going right now. And so I want to talk about the kinds of candidates. There's 2 kinds of candidates that are willing to step into the shoes of an interim. One is retired superintendents that still have gas in the tank. They want to help students and school boards. They miss education. So they want to come in just for that 1 year and be a placeholder to make sure that things are moving in the right direction and the board has the support that they need. Usually that kind of an interim doesn't launch any brand new, great big initiatives unless the board already is headed in that direction. Then they'll support you in that way. But they are a project-based, usually 1 year person, and then they might want to get on to retirement, or they might want to go help another district as an interim next year. The other kind of interim candidate is someone who is interested in this job longer term, and they view a 1 year contract as an interim as an opportunity to maybe audition for the long-term job as superintendent, to maybe test it out and see how it goes in Royalton, see if they like it, see if you like them. So those are people that tend to be maybe mid-career or a little bit later in the career, but they are not looking just for a 1 year job. They are looking for something longer term. So both kinds of candidates work. They just have very different motivations, I think, for taking on the position. So when I say that it can affect the hiring and the interview process for the interim position, again, this is if you go for an interim position. Generally speaking, if someone is retired and they're, they've done a great job as a superintendent, they have a reputation, they're enjoying retirement, or maybe they're serving as an interim right now, many of those folks will not want to go through a competitive interview process for your interim position. If it's just this 1 year gig, they don't want to come out of retirement and compete against someone else who might be retired because one of them is going to lose. So in general, people who are interims that are retired prefer to be the only candidate that meets with the board. And that's because their name goes public if the board interviews them. So any candidates, and I think the 3 of you that have done searches before, you remember that as soon as you decide who to interview, those names go public. So if you have 3 or 4 sort of legendary retired superintendents, they do not want to compete against each other in that public spectacle of interviewing with the board. So they would prefer to visit with the board chair or a board committee in advance to figure out if they're the right person for you. And then the chair or the committee only brings one person to meet with the board for an interview. And the assumption is that that person's going to be brought on board as your interim if they winnow it down to just one. Does that make sense? The other kind of candidate that is looking for a longer term opportunity, they're more accustomed to the competitive interview process, so they may not mind their names going public, that they're looking for another opportunity. So if it's someone that's looking at this as a chance to get a leg up in the opportunity, or maybe you still could conduct a search next year if you wanted to, but if you really, really like this person, you do not have to conduct a search. There's no requirement that you conduct a superintendent search. So if you have an interim that wants to stay, you can simply say, hey, we'll give you another contract, maybe 2 or 3 years this time. So that kind of candidate will usually come in for an interview, and the board might meet with 2 or 3 people. Any questions on that? And again, I'm just speaking in general. I can't speak for every candidate. I've just noticed that retired folks don't really want to stick their neck out there if they don't think they're going to get the job. We're good? Okay.
Randy's got
Just a second, Ryan, have you explained to her our board co-chair?
Not yet.
Yeah. You want to? I mean, she should know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
So we don't have chair and vice chair, we have co-chairs. And
Okay.
no vice chair for us, so that's really
Got
good.
it.
yeah, I just thought you should probably know that.
Okay. So the co-chairs, for example, could meet with candidates, or do Zoom interviews or have coffee with whomever without those names going public. Because state statute will define someone as a finalist once the school board selects them for an interview. So that's kind of that differentiation. So if there are people on the board, if it's the co-chairs or the exec committee or something, or a personnel committee, you could winnow the pool down to one person or 1, 2, or 3 to bring them back for the whole board to talk to. So yeah, thank you for explaining that, the co-chair model. That's helpful. And I mentioned protocols for the full search next year. That's only if you choose to do a search. Now, if you end up with a retired person who only wants this for a year, they're planning to be done on June 30th, 2026, you are definitely going to have to do a search next year. That's good, and it gives you a fresh start, and people know that that person's only there as a placeholder. So the pool might be pretty good. If you have someone in the position as your interim who wants the job long-term, they really like that, they really like you as a district, maybe you really like them, but you still want to do a search, cast a wide net, spend the money to conduct a search, but they're welcome to apply. What can happen in that case is your pool is going to be a lot smaller because, again, other folks won't risk their name going public to interview with you if they think that the interim has a slam dunk on the job. So an interim who wants the job long-term, if you do a search, it can subdue your pool to a smaller number of people. But again, you don't have to do a search either. Sometimes there's an interim who's in the middle of their career that realizes it's just not a fit. I'm happy to be looking elsewhere. So they start looking elsewhere next year for another job. And they maybe tell people, I'm not interested in the Royalton one long-term. I told them it was 1 year and that's what I'm going to stick to. And then your pool would probably go up again with some more numbers. But if you have an interim who is shouting it from the rooftops that they want to stay because they really love Royalton and they want that job, it's a risk that some other candidates won't take in terms of applying and having their name go public. Make sense? Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about candidates for the moment, other than I have been getting some phone calls. When people heard that Christine had gotten the job in Hastings, I got calls from 5 or 6 people that are interested. Half of them are retired and the other half are looking for a longer term gig. So you've got interest in this position. It's a really great district. Your reputation is very good. Your location is really good. So you already do have probably 5 or 6 people that will throw their hat in the ring for this. Okay.
That's great.
Okay. Awesome. Formality of the search. I'm going to touch on that only from the perspective of how they're different, because I did mention a typical search is about 3 months. If you do a full search in 3 weeks, again, tough to do, but you could do it. Generally speaking, an interim search is way more informal. Okay, the timeline, it's a couple of weeks. You right now have about 3.5 weeks to have a signed contract. Hopefully someone would be in by July 1. If they're not in by July 1, you always could ask a neighboring superintendent to sign as your identified official with authority on behalf of the district. Some other superintendents in districts around you might say, yeah, I'm willing to do that on a daily rate. I don't know, Christine, if she'd be available to do it, but sometimes there are superintendents that offer a short-term sort of bridge signing service for all your official documents, but there's nobody in the building all the time. Those are just kind of Band-Aids. So you could bring someone in the 1st or 2nd or 3rd week of July if you have someone willing to sign those documents for you and serve as your official superintendent during the early part of July. But ideally, your timeline, you'd have someone ready to start July 1 in Royalton. Stakeholder input, I mentioned that earlier. If you do an interim search, it is more informal and there is no stakeholder input. So you do not do a survey of your community or your staff. You don't do any focus groups. You don't have anyone else participate in the school board interview with your finalist or finalists. So they do not have that kind of input in the interim search. The hiring criteria or leadership profile, generally, again, as a placeholder, the leadership profile, it's what's on the horizon this year. And that's all you're really thinking about is what are our biggest fires between now and the end of June 2026. We need someone with background in, maybe it's finance, maybe it's running a referendum, maybe it's recreating administrative structure or something like that. If there are things immediately on the horizon that this person's going to step into, that you want to talk about and make sure that candidates know that's the kind of person you're looking for. When you do a full search, the leadership profile is much more in-depth. Board members take a hiring criteria survey. We craft a leadership profile with bullet points about what's really important. That's in the brochure. There's all kinds of stuff that happens for a full search that would not occur in an interim search. But you do want a couple priorities identified that the board should talk about and really say, we want them to have this, this, and this, or experience in these two areas, or things like that. And then brochure and posting, there's no vacancy brochure for an interim search. You can post it if you want to on MSBA's website. We have a couple of interim searches right now that have put it on MSBA's website with the resumes or a cover letter being sent to the district. So the district runs the interim search. MSBA does not do that. Or you could skip that sort of application process, and I just send you the 5 or 6 names and resumes that have told me they're interested in Royalton, and that's your pool that you start with. It saves you time if you do that. We do keep this running list of people who are interested in being interims. So I've got people already, but if you wanted to post, you could. Other people would say you also want to maybe put it on your website for a week or so just to meet any equal employment opportunity criteria that say we posted the position and Barb sent us 6 people, but anybody else who's interested could have thrown their hat in the ring during that week. So I would turn to your HR folks for that. Not all districts do actually post it because of the informality of this process. But that's entirely up to you. It's one other thing that you could think about doing. Any questions on that? I just talked a lot about the process. Good? Okay. Rolling on to state statute. I do want to mention the open meeting law because you must conduct the interim search or the full search in open meetings. You can never close a meeting for the purpose of finding your superintendent. The only time you can close a meeting for your superintendent is to conduct their evaluation, but not for the search process, and that includes the interim. So that's why I mentioned those interviews. Those are being done in a public meeting. Those names go public as soon as you choose who to interview. If, though, you have the committee or the co-chairs kind of looking at the resumes or doing phone calls with everybody and winnowing it down, generally those do not need to be posted as open meetings. Now, one of the things I didn't ask when I started is I don't know if you have policy 213 in Royalton. That's the policy you would have adopted that says we treat our standing committees just like the board. So your standing committees, if you have standing committees, have the 3-day posting requirement, and you have to conduct those committee meetings in the open. So do you have a personnel committee or anything like that that's a standing committee?
No.
No? Okay. So this could be considered maybe an ad hoc committee, and maybe it's just the 2 co-chairs or the co-chairs and 1 person, although you just don't want a quorum. You definitely do not want a quorum going through the resumes. So you don't have to do this in public until you're going to interview people. Then you have to do it in public, and it has to be posted 3 days before. Like tonight's a public meeting, right? This was posted as a special meeting. Do you have any audience members or just the board and Christine?
No, just the board and the staff.
Okay. Okay, but the doors are open. Someone could come in if they want. And that's same requirement for your interviews and such. Okay. I mentioned the Data Practices Act only because you are dealing with personnel data. So if I send resumes and names to somebody on the board, that's private data. So you have to be super careful how you handle it. you can't tell anybody who's expressed interest in this job. The only time that names goes public again is if you choose to interview them. So please be really careful with privacy concerns and the people who have said that they would like to talk to you about this job. That's all done confidentially. You don't put their name out there. You don't post it or anything like that. Any questions on state statute?
For that portion, so if you sent them to board members, can we share those with the other board members for them to look at?
Yes, very carefully. You could certainly, or I could even send it to all board members if you want, or I just send it to one person or two people and they forward it. The one thing I would say is make sure that you BCC everybody so that people don't start replying to the emails with their thoughts on the candidates. You know, if you do two and it goes to everybody, if someone replied and said, well, I really like Jim Johnson and Sue Jones, that's board business that you need to do at the board table. And someone could request your emails through a data request, and that could be a violation of the open meeting law. So you could share those one way for information only with a BCC so that if someone replies, it only goes to the sender. You're not having one of those serial meetings, discussions online. Be really careful of that. And then the only other thing I'd say is when you send it, make sure, because people will probably look at it on their computer, be really careful where you're looking at it. Kitchen tables are out if your family's walking around behind you because they could see a resume and you just broke the law. Be careful in coffee shops, be careful in your office. Anyone that can look over your shoulder at your computer screen, you risk breaking the data privacy laws in Minnesota. So yes, you can certainly share them. Board members, I know you're used to handling confidential data. This would just be one more thing that you'd have to be super careful with to ensure that nobody sees what you're looking at.
But they could respond just to the sender with, I like candidate number 1 and number 3.
Yes.
Without names and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay.
And you could, if you wanted to be real careful, call them candidates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or A, B, C, D, E. And when they reply to whoever sent it, I'd love to talk to candidate B and D. And then you don't risk the emails, you know, sending it to the wrong person or something like that. So.
Yep. I think that's what we did last time.
Okay.
Any
Great.
other questions?
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, we got it screwed up and this thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about licensure for a second. They must have a Minnesota license, a current Minnesota license. We ran into an issue last year with a couple of retired folks that assumed their license was still current and it wasn't. And they had to scramble to get a variance from BOSA, the Board of School Administrators, and they had to start earning CEUs toward reactivating their license. So we don't want to ever assume someone has a current license. You'd want them to confirm and give you a copy of a current Minnesota license. Sometimes people from out of state are looking to retire in beautiful Minnesota, and so they hear about openings, especially in central and northern Minnesota, and they are interested in the job. We do not have reciprocity. And I think too many superintendents in our neighboring states think that we do, that if they have a license in Iowa or Wisconsin, that they could just get here, you know, show up and start working. That is not the case. Minnesota is one of the few states and maybe the only state that does not offer reciprocity for superintendent licenses. They're going to have to get a variance. They're going to have to jump through some hoops. So if you have an out-of-state person who's interested, be really, really careful. They also have a disadvantage in that they don't understand Minnesota's educational finance laws, which are pretty complex. They'd have to learn it, and some people have the skills to learn very quickly. But our educational system here, in terms of how it's financed, and also the tiered licensing system, can be a challenge for someone who has not been a Minnesota superintendent before. So if you want them to hit the ground running, your best bet is to hire someone who's been a Minnesota superintendent, and in particular, someone who's done it recently. Some of the retired folks that heard about your opening and are interested maybe have been out of education for a year or two or more. Doesn't mean they're not going to be a great interim superintendent. and they've probably kept up on some of the changes coming out of the legislature. People who've this past year or this current year been a superintendent are going to have working knowledge, obviously more quickly than someone who has been out of the saddle for a year or two. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't talk to people who have been out of the superintendency for a year or two. They're probably still amazing people. Just that learning curve, you want to ask them about things like the READ Act and some of the things that have changed this last year, especially to make sure that they have that knowledge or could access that knowledge pretty quickly. The only other thing I've got is contract options. You do need a contract with both an interim superintendent and a superintendent. Interim contracts generally are 1 year at a time. Superintendent contracts usually are 3 years. We've seen some 2-year contracts lately, but very few people would take an actual superintendent job with a 1-year contract. They want a little bit more time to prove themselves, but the interims are expecting a 1 year. Now, we've had some people stay at their interim position for 2 or 3 years and just have consecutive 1-year contracts. We have someone that started as an interim superintendent and they've been there 8 years. I think they moved to superintendent after the 2nd or 3rd contract and just finally said, just be our superintendent. So it could turn into a long-term relationship, even if it's not intended to be that way, but you do have to have a contract. MSBA has the model contract for both superintendents and a model contract for interim superintendents. And if you want me to send that to someone, I'm happy to send one or both of those off. When you negotiate, they're going to have different needs. Also, keep in mind that people who are retired need to talk to their financial advisors so they don't lose their retirement benefits by working for you. And that's on their end to make sure they're not going to mess up whatever they're getting for retirement from their work in school districts. Very often when they're retired, they don't need health insurance benefits either. Sometimes they're looking for more flexibility. We have had interims, and it's not always the retired folks. Sometimes a current superintendent is looking for maybe 1 day a week that they could work from home, work remotely. Kind of have to be creative with the contract negotiations when you find the right person. It's not one size fits all anymore. So just keep that in mind. I had one more thing on contracts. Can't remember what it was, but I'll think of it. Interim superintendent contracts. Oh, well, it'll come to me. That is all I've got for you, but I want to answer your questions and talk more specifically about next steps for Royalton. So I'll stop talking. I've done a lot of talking, so I'll turn it back over to whomever, Ryan or the other chair, to take it from here.
Yep. What questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
Barb, have you ever worked with any districts that look at co-oping with a neighboring district for superintendent?
Yes. It does occur, and it depends on the relationships between the district and the person that's serving both districts. One of the most important things, if you have a shared superintendent, is that you're really, really clear about how much time you expect them to be in both districts. Some people try to do, they say it's part-time in this district and part-time in that district, and they try to do it, and it turns out being full-time in both districts. So they got 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Some people also aren't great at balancing priorities. So it has to be someone with the temperament to be able to serve really well in a part-time capacity to 2 very different, possibly school boards and districts. So yeah, we do have some of those, and I have a PowerPoint presentation that Gary Lee gave at the leadership conference about a shared superintendent, and I can forward that to people if you're interested as well.
I would take that.
Okay. Should I send that just to you or to everyone?
Everyone.
To everyone? Okay. So the shared superintendent PowerPoint to everyone. Do you want contracts yet? Model contracts, interim and both of them? Okay. Yeah. Both contracts. Okay. Got it. Yeah, so that's a viable option. And sometimes someone who's looking, or district looking for an interim will approach a neighboring district. Usually it's the board chairs talking to one another about, could we maybe lean on your superintendent to get us through this coming year, even if that superintendent's full-time. And so they might buy 1 or 2 days a week from the other district. Obviously, the superintendent has to be okay with that as well, because they have a contract with the other district. But sometimes someone's willing to work for both districts just for 1 year. It can be less expensive for you, for example, to contract with a neighboring district for someone a day or 2 a week versus 5 days a week. It can also be, a cost savings for that district to try to cut their person down to part-time to save them a little money over the course of the next year as well. So if you're creative and you find someone interested in working with you on it, that can certainly be a route you could take too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? John?
I'm good.
Lucas?
Oh, it's all.
Yeah.
I can't think of any at the moment.
I'm good.
I think that's it for questions from us.
Okay. So shall I log off? And if you need anything, you just shoot me a text or an email and I can log back on during your meeting if you need me to. I'm going to be in the office for quite a while tonight doing some things. So,
Yeah, that sounds great.
okay. All right. Well, it's great to see everybody. Thank you again for the virtual option, and reach out to me tonight. I'll be here probably till at least 10. If you have questions during the evening, and then if someone could let me know tonight or tomorrow, what you decided to do. I told the folks who have inquired about this that I'd get back to them with what your board decided to do, no matter what it is, even if it's to delay the decision for a couple of weeks. I told them I'd let them know what you chose. So that would be appreciated.
I can send you that tonight, whatever
Okay.
that looks like.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think that should be good.
I'll see you later. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Discussion. Do we want to do an interim? That's the way I'm leaning, but
I would lean towards that, or even doing that co-op, like a part-time, just, as we talked a little bit about our start to negotiations, just to see. That would just be my initial gut feeling, but.
the hard part for me on that is that time. You know what I mean? Like talking to 3 or 4 other superintendents and then talking to their board. And then they would have to go to their board meeting and, that might not happen this month. That's the only thing I worry about. Cause we have a lot going on. At least financially, for sure. And negotiations and all that stuff. That's a lot of outside work. So that's why I'm leaning towards interim versus that. Cause I'm all for looking at that. And that may be like the December, January conversation of what we want to do at that point. That's just my opinion. Randy?
There's a quirky thing about it. I wish you knew who the candidates were and you knew something about them, because, the pool of candidates that she knows of is who you're gonna get to apply. There might be a liar in it, but that's right now who you're, if you knew anything more about it, you the interim, all that does is keep the wheels on the bus. That's all it does. I don't mind the idea of hiring for somebody who wants to. As a board member, I like the idea of a test drive with a superintendent, without all the, it's not like the TV shows where you meet somebody and get married in 30 days, you get a year to see what it's like. I don't know. I don't know. I don't do hiring and HR and all that stuff every day. So for me to look through the stacks of paper, all I can do is measure them after I talk to them. That's all I can measure. So But I don't know.
I'm not sure, because I just trying to absorb all the information. It's such a unique process for an interim in comparison to what I was imagining, I guess.
The
So
weird thing is.
I guess I
they're
didn't
both
realize
unique.
it
Both
was-
processes.
such a like, it feels like a limited process,
Yep.
Um,
I thought the same thing, cause I learned that as we were talking on the phone already, so.
yeah, like all of the rules that she was kind of insinuating we must follow, and I was just, I guess, surprised by them all. So just kind of wrapping my head around like the interim process. I think the interim process or the co-oping process is obviously much better than doing a full search at this moment. Since it's not the right season for that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what that would look like, I guess. What would our committee look like? Just the two chairs?
Well, I won't be here for it, cause it's gonna happen in the next 2 weeks.
It's right there.
You know what I mean? So. Like, I can get the information, look it over and still respond to stuff. Like, I have the international plan, so I can do all that stuff, but. But really it'd be 3 of you guys getting together with that.
We don't have that policy 213, do we?
No.
So I would like to see multiple candidates. She said that, oh, some will shy away if you bring in more than one. Well, that's part of the job. I'm sorry. If you want the job, interim or not, you gotta compete with somebody. You don't just get it because I'm retired. I don't want to compete with anybody. So I want to see multiple candidates and I want to see us advertising online. So if there are any local superintendents or local people that are licensed superintendents that would like to stab at it, I think that's the way to go. I think we get as many candidates that we can and then put together a group of 3 of us and sit down and talk with them and see what they have to offer. But I don't think we limit ourselves to one person because they're retired and they don't want their name public and don't want to compete because they might lose. Well, I'm sorry, then I guess don't put your name in the hat.
Will it become public if all board members interview?
Right,
That's when it's public.
right.
But you can get a group of candidates, 3 of you meet and then,
Cause she had said that you could talk to them.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
a feel for them.
But I still want all board members involved, I don't think
Then
it's
it
right.
becomes a public meeting where it's not.
right,
I don't know.
yeah, and I like, everyone gets a different feel.
I agree. I'm afraid if we do put it public, we're gonna also narrow what the people that we get. People will not put their hat in the ring, or I've been there personally. You never wanna put your name to a different position if you're not gonna get it. So I get both sides of it, but I do think we have to go the interim route or a co-op route. I would hate to rush this and not get input from the community, like to go through the full process.
Yep.
I don't know what the best way about it is either, because I also wanna make sure we get the best interim candidate, because if we get the best interim candidate, they could be our full-time, potentially. So you'd hate to make the wrong decision there too.
Well, you could make the wrong decision that way and be glad it's
Correct.
only 1 year.
That's,
I mean,
that's the other plus, I guess, yeah.
Been there, I drove that bus once. That's a lot of fun.
That's why I would like the larger group, because the larger group are the ones that may want to be long-term. So now you can take them, put them in the spot as an interim for a year, and if we decide we like them, we may, sign a long-term contract with them without even going through a search, so it might save us time that way. I think if we're just going, let's just do interim right now and that's it, I think we may get some of those candidates that only want the 1 year, and then the maybe better candidates that are looking long-term, they, we'll miss out on them.
It'd be interesting to ask her if she told those 5 we want to do an interim with interviews, how many would still want their hat in the ringer? Cause that might be down to 0 all of a sudden because they're not comfortable putting their name out because they have current roles. So it'd be interesting to see what she would say if she has a feel for them.
Yep, I think she does.
I think she has a good pulse on it, so it would be nice to see her thoughts, cause I wouldn't be opposed to it if there was multiple willing to interview and have their name public. I do think you get a better read with a committee of people interviewing versus just one or two meeting with them. Everybody picks up such different things, characteristics, that
Right.
just mannerisms. It's a big decision, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I'm so confused about the stifled process. You know,
Yeah.
I was looking forward to the multiple
Right.
perspectives, and people gleaning what they see in each candidate. So that was kind of a surprise for me to realize that the bulk of the decision would fall on the minority, well, two people or three maximum. That gives me reservation is all. So I'm just trying to understand the full process and see what other avenues we have to take.
Can we maybe buy some time by maybe reaching out to a couple superintendents? I mean, we can do it in a couple days and somebody can just say, no, we're not doing it, even to buy us time into July. You know what I mean? Where if
Almost
you
like
reach
a
out,
sign.
yep, and just somebody that can sign as a superintendent and. You know what I mean? It would buy us some time. If you have to have somebody with a licensed superintendent license, you know,
With negotiations and finance, I mean, Heidi,
I did still,
she knows all that.
she do, yeah, she do that.
right,
You probably wouldn't, depending on who, you know, I can't say for sure, but it'd be pretty hard to do all the committee work when you're full-time somewhere else, and it's negotiation time for everybody. That's where shares can be challenging, just those kinds of things, but it's not impossible. If you don't
Like
need
a
them,
Little bit.
if you just need the signer, like just somebody to be your Iowa where they sign the stuff that you need signed and make sure people have access to stuff. I can even do that, so that doesn't matter, but if you want more than that.
Just someone we would get question asked.
July would be your best time to have one of the superintendent safety, because once August hits, you have to have one there. It's busy. Opening week, all that stuff, get ready.
I think that's, main question is ask Barb who would be willing.
Yeah, but sent her a text.
Oh, okay. And then I guess I'd like to see the list that she has, you know, the list of candidates, who they are, where they're from, where they've been, what they're doing.
Well, I think we'll only get those once we decide what we're gonna do. So like if we say we're gonna do an interim and we're going to have this committee meet with them and whittle it down from board members and then that committee talk to, you know, 3 or 4 or whatever it is, they interview. We'll have to tell her that and then she'll give that out and then they'll apply or they won't. Sure. So
And this was a question I had and I forgot about it. She's mentioned something about, I just wrote down, having to spend the money to conduct a full search. Do you have any idea of what that cost is?
last time it was about 10,000, something like that. Cause they, so with that, they do, like, they set up all the quizzes that.
That's the purchase services cost. It
Yeah.
also costs the district because there's a lot of meetings,
Surveyor.
a lot of, you know, a lot of hours and that we ask people to be here for that. So you're thinking a lot like me, so I like the idea of, you know, you could probably get somebody that's, if you did a full superintendent search would apply for the job, you're probably gonna get somebody to apply for that, and maybe you could hire them without doing that full search and stuff. And that, my experience, or what, take it for what it's worth, but I think that's great, but we do have to make the best decision for the next year before we make that step. And if it happens to be that, that's what it happens to be, but we do have to make the best decision. And I don't know what that means even. I don't want to get all caught up in that thinking oh, we're gonna get something done and then find out, well, that was a bad decision, so. But I babbled, said nothing, so. I think a interim or a co-op. I'm not really all that interested in a retired person coming in and stepping in for a year. I'm not terribly interested in that.
So I think that's where we say we're looking for interim, possibly looking at full-time, right?
Well,
Well, either way, it's an interim.
Yeah, I
Right,
know,
but that would
she's
be,
gonna want, they're gonna wanna know which way you're leaning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, it's an interim, but. we
Yeah,
may get
either
that
way,
retired one
it's a
that does-
year or you can compete, you know,
Right.
or it could be longer, right?
Right,
So she said, two probably,
Two would maybe go through it then.
yep, that's what she thinks anyway.
You're really close, John.
and that's without putting it on our website though, too. I think that is a good idea to put it out there.
Yeah, well, and that wouldn't hurt anything to do that either, like I'd like it on MSBA and on our website. To put it out there, even if it's for 10 days or whatever.
Yep.
Just to advertise, like, we're looking for an interim superintendent.
Do you have to be clear in that posting? Like, are we doing the interview process or do you just wonder, can they reach out to one person?
Well,
That's gonna
they
still make a difference on.
they
the
would
people.
still reach out to one person, but they'd meet with the committee first and you guys would figure that out. Before they would, you know, go into the pool of who we want to interview.
so tonight we need to decide what route we're taking. And then probably who that committee is.
We don't have to, but I think we
Well,
can.
we should, we're
I
here.
agree, I think we better.
You wanna start next week?
Yeah, we gotta do something.
Yeah, you gotta start it.
So from what I'm hearing. We're gonna look at an interim. With competition. Like interview competition, to do that, post it on MSBA and the school website. Is there anything else?
You're gonna post it both places, right?
Yep.
You can always fail a search if we don't like either, I assume.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question, what happens if you only get two?
That, well, let's make the assumption we get those two we don't like either, we just fail and then we have to figure out the next step. We have that ability.
Then I assume that those people that were probably ain't going to be working anyhow, so then you can probably fall back on that.
On the retired.
Retired, you can always drop back to that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's 9 school districts looking for 3 superintendents, right?
No, but there are just
There are.
districts looking for one or something like that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And our one's actually finishing up all this. Most of very good.
So what, if we were to look for a co-op option, just to have a signer. Waiting in wings, we're not gonna
So
accomplish this.
a co-op's different than a sign.
Okay, well, I'm kind of seeing, like, just reaching out to any other superintendent close by. Are we just gonna cast a net and do them all, or are we gonna specifically choose?
If we need a signer, we just continue to use Christine out further.
If you just want the sign.
If we just want a signer, if we're looking for anything different, then I would agree would be a different conversation, but if we just need the signer.
Although now that I think about it, you probably have to talk to the current board of whomever that's shooting for a signer, so I don't know if I can do that.
I don't know.
Being new there, I don't know. A co-op would have to definitely get quota.
Well, right,
I think a signer might too. So it
Yeah.
talks about when you work outside of your contract, you have to have board approval. Is that language in there? Those are pretty consistent across every superintendent. So you'd have to get board approval for that. Doesn't mean you won't get board approval.
Right.
This is our stuff.
It's just another step.
that's why I'm asking, do we cast a wide net to all of the districts around and just hope someone. Has a board meeting coming in 2 weeks, that they can get this, I mean, that's really what it all depends upon, is when their board meeting is gonna land, if it's gonna land before July 1st. Or we have to have this position filled.
So what if you have no signer? That's a dumb question maybe, but what happens?
They start to say that they're not gonna fund you.
Is that what
Been
it
there
is?
before,
Like this?
yeah.
Well, you can't run a high school without a superintendent. You can run anything without a principal, but you can't run without a superintendent. So I don't know about the funding necessarily, but you wouldn't have the individual with authority. Heidi's your backup. You know, business managers are generally your backup. So like the superintendent was in a sudden car accident, couldn't do anything. That is a signer. But I just don't know and so I think we asked Barb to come back on. She might be able to answer those questions for us and help us know exactly ramifications of this.
You want me to ask her to pop back on?
Hopefully we don't get to that point of having that issue.
Right. It's good to ask.
We
just
don't
to
have a lot of time.
Yeah,
It's,
right.
Till I,
I guess I didn't realize there was a, I
that
thought we
much.
had until the year started. I didn't realize we had 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks.
And then you throw the open meeting law in there. You know, so.
Hmm.
We have to have so many meetings and everyone has to be posted 3 days in advance and, you know, it starts to be a logistical
Nightmare.
thing.
She'll be on in a second.
Hello,
Hi Barb, welcome back.
thank you.
We had a couple questions, so what was the first one? What happens if July 1st we don't have a signer? What are the ramifications of that in the Iowa?
In theory or in reality? I'll probably tell you both. In theory, you'd be violating statute because you're required to have a licensed superintendent if you have a classified secondary school, which you do. You have a high school. So you would be in violation of statute. However, I'm going to tell you that the state of Minnesota has bigger issues right now than pursuing a district who's without a superintendent for a couple of weeks. It happens sometimes. You think about a superintendent that has a health crisis or gets in an accident or passes away in the middle of the year. There are districts that don't have someone as a licensed signer for a little while. I think the main thing would be that you're making an effort to get one. And if you're making a good faith effort to find somebody, and if anyone does say, hey, why don't you have a superintendent, you can tell them what you're doing to get one. So in reality, I don't think there's any ramifications unless you go months without a licensed superintendent. Then I think someone's going to get pretty concerned. But the transition time, it can get messy. People are busy. And like I said, they've got bigger fish to fry at the state than track down districts without a superintendent for a couple of weeks. So I personally think you'd be okay, but I'm not an attorney and don't quote me, but I think you'd be fine.
Okay. What was the other question? You wrote it down.
I would know, or about the finance, the expense.
Oh,
You guys already answered that. So
Sorry.
that's a little search costs.
so currently, what does a full search cost?
How many students are enrolled at Royalton approximately?
1,000 pre-K through 12.
1,000?
Yep.
Okay, so we have an enrollment-based fee structure. So districts under 1,000, it's this year's fees. It might go up a little bit next year, but this year for under 1,000, it's 7,900. For 1,000 to 2,000 is 9,900. If you're close to 1,000, we're going to do it for 7,900 this year. Now, again, if you do it next year, it might be $500 more because we always review our pricing every year. So it could be a little bit higher, but I think between 8 and 9,000 tops.
Do you count preschool or do you just do K-12 enrollment?
We should do pre-K 12. Same kind of thing though, is we don't want to,
Really cool.
make our members dent their budget by trying to pay an extra 2,000 for a search. We'll do it for what you can afford. And if you're close to 1,000, we round down so we can give you the lower price.
We have 62 kids.
Good questions. Any other ones at this point?
Anybody else?
That's good.
Okay, well, I'm here if you need me. Just text me again, Ryan, and I can hop back on if something comes up.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. It's nice to have them available like that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Wow.
not running on.
Yeah, that's really good. So what do we think? Do we want to do the interim with competition, post on MSBA and on the school website?
I move that. I'll move
I
that.
don't think we have enough time to do a full search.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
Agreed.
all right. So Randy? Good motion?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, anything else to discuss on this? Right,
We want to put a committee together?
yes, thank you. I was waiting for that. There's something. Thank you. All right, who would like to be on the committee?
I would.
Lucas?
I think I wouldn't mind.
Maria? Ellie?
Sure.
Okay. Well, you're gonna get most of the information if you can send it to us, so.
Okay.
So we'll do that. I'll let her know that tonight and, we'll see if she comes back with, when she tells everybody and what that looks like. And then, I will ask her to contact Mandy and David and Christine about the language that, what the posting should look like between MSBA, like if we need to do anything or if they have that posting, so we can match it on our website. To do that. And then when we get that stuff, so what are we looking at? About a week? To open it up and close it to have that deadline?
I'd like to see it open for a full week.
Yeah.
So the 16th? Right?
Assuming it gets posted in next. Yeah.
Well, that Monday, I think Monday's the 9th, right?
Yeah.
Monday's the ninth.
Posted tomorrow, Fred.
Yep, but that would still give it a full week.
A full, that'd give it
Yeah, we'll
over,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah, if we get it posted by the end of this week, I would say
13th? Or 16th?
close it on the 16th.
Okay. All right, and then I can,
In the meantime, she can send us, when she's getting, she can send it to Ellie, the
as she, as
candidate
they
that
come
she
in,
gets.
yep,
Would they be applying through MSBA then, I assume?
no, they would get sent here,
They get sent
so
here.
like to Mandy,
Okay.
and then she would forward them to us.
The applications, they
Yes.
fill them out at MSBA, that's what he's saying. They apply at MSBA and they forward them to you.
Yes,
Yes, that's what she's saying. You said it.
So,
So the vote-
our language on our website is going to have that process on it.
yes.
Yeah, to apply at MSBA.
Okay.
But then also, I just so we know it, so she'll send them, but everybody gets to view the application. Cause you can do BCC, and then the committee actually,
I
cause you
don't know what
can,
that means.
I'll take care of that.
Or just send one
I was
individual.
gonna say, don't put
Six
that on
times.
me. I'm
Yep.
not.
What does that mean?
It's just
Blind carbon
copy.
copy.
blind copy people, and that way, can't, if that person replies, it won't only go to sender, it doesn't go to everybody, and you also then keep, one person
I don't
doesn't see
reply,
that
so
person.
I'm doing good if I get it read,
Right, so what happens is Ryan would send it out to all of us, but we would only see it as it came to us,
Okay.
because we're BCC.
What's the committee for? Cause we're doing the interview process. To put them to even being a finalist?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we may get 12 applicants,
That's fair.
you know what I mean? So,
I just didn't know if we could all respond via the email what we needed the committee for, if we're all seeing it, cause you can't conduct an interview still, or can you still meet with them if we're doing a full interview?
so
process?
that's the 3 people are gonna meet with them ahead of
They
time.
can though,
They can.
even when you're doing a full interview process?
You better double check.
We can always do screening ahead of time.
I
Yes.
took it differently from her. That's what I thought the difference was of the two, but if we can, that makes sense on why we have the committee, that's why I was confused.
Yep. So the
Okay.
committee, whether we're doing a full search or not, that committee could meet with
Okay,
those.
I just wanna comment, one thing that you can do, because this is how a normal search is done. The entire board sees the entire candidate pool, it still is private data, and then the MSV puts forward who they, so let me give an example. I've gone through it a few times. So you might, a particular board may want to see every single applicant. So MSBA will have, let's say, 10 applicants, and they put forward their 5. The board can review those 5 and they're A, B, C, D, E. They're not, names are not public. The board says, I don't want E, I want G out of here. And they pull them, and then they become finalists and get actually interviewed. That way you don't have a subcommittee of everybody seeing every application. And then you decide if you want to go with MSB, because they'll give you if you had a lot of applicants, they would give you a recommendation of who they think the 5 are, because they vet them first. You get called, you're interviewed on the phone with MSBA, like quite an extensive phone call, and then it comes. So if you're gonna go that route,
But they're not doing that with the interim search. They're not gonna call references, they're not, you
no,
know what I mean?
they've already vetted.
Well, they've had just people come talk to them, so
Yeah.
whoever applies, they're still not gonna call the references, that committee is gonna have to talk to them and call references. Cause we're
Well,
not paying them
but
to,
actually, true, but even when you get your finalists, you still call references.
once we get
board
the
does.
finalists, yes. I'm saying like, if we have 10 applicants and that subcommittee takes it from, takes the input from everybody and wants to meet with these 6. They can meet with those 6 ahead of time and then say, we're gonna pick 3 out of these 6 to come to the board for full interviews. Or they could say all 5 or all 6. Right? That would still,
I just know that. Okay, maybe it's your search. It's not my place. I'm just telling you what I've experienced in Eden.
but those have always been full searches too, haven't they?
They have,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, if you're wanting to see everything, to keep everybody having an opportunity to see everything that's done. That's how it's done in a full search.
I would ask that, yeah.
You know what I mean?
They
So
get-
you don't have just 3 people seeing all 5 and putting forward 2, you have everybody seeing all 5.
They will all be seen, right?
You'll be
Just
seeing
on
the
paper.
paper.
On paper, you won't be able to,
Paper doesn't help.
well, actually, though, that's all you get there too, is seeing them on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either way, you're kind of stuck with paper and you got
Either
it,
way, you are stuck with paper. That's
Tell you
true.
decide finalists, yeah.
Yeah.
got it.
That's why it's nice to have the committee, because you can do that one extra step and get to know the person a little bit.
That makes
And
sense.
then go, that person's not gonna fit in here, or they will, and this would be great.
Right.
Well, that's those 3's perspective, but the other 3 may have completely different perspective.
Yep, and that's why we do the full interview.
That's where the full interview comes in.
Yep.
What I'm saying is you might talk to the 4th though, and 3 are not like, and the other 3 love them, you don't get to.
Yeah.
You're trusting.
So with that, do we wanna schedule a meeting to talk about that right away?
So Ryan,
So the committee would meet in a full meeting? To interview?
So we would have to have a meeting to decide finalists and name finalists first, correct?
No, the committee I thought was putting forward that recommendation.
But how do we announce that? How does that go public? It goes
Well,
public
that's
at our
Barb.
meeting, right?
We should ask Barb because you can likely just, I don't know that you need a meeting. I don't know. We should ask her though. So, because if you don't have to extend this any longer than you do, you don't want to.
Yep.
So should we have her come back on and ask that question?
yep,
Yeah,
Sure.
We might as well get all the answers while we're here.
Right, and do it right, because you don't want to break any law,
No.
put yourself in a position to get sued, to be happen to interview somebody.
So last time we did a super full search. I was the chairman that wasn't very good at my job because it was the middle of COVID and everything was on computers and I was trying to figure out how to run them and we labeled them A, B, C, D, E, and then we mislabeled them. Or numbered them then too, I don't know, but. So we were in the middle of a conversation and we were talking about different people and. So, but try not to screw that up, I guess that's my only thing I know. So.
And I think, Mandy, you can probably handle that, right? So as they come
Yes.
in and,
Mhm.
you're getting ready to scan one, this is A, just put it on there, next one B, and then when you send them all out, they'll be. lettered.
I can do that.
There she is.
Hello.
All right, what was our question?
About how do we announce?
Committee,
Yeah.
Oh, the committee, so, we're looking at, right now. Looking at an interim, but with competition, so there would be, interviews for it. We would like to post it on the MSBA and school website, so I know we own some of that, but what we were talking about was. As people apply, they would apply and send it, we could send it to Mandy here, right?
Yep.
Okay, so once they do that, Mandy can letter them and send them out to the entire board, BCC, the entire board. And so Ellie could ask for everybody's feedback and compile it right there. With that, we can have a subcommittee of 3 that could do interviews with, or Q&A, I should say, maybe not an interview, but Q&A with any of those candidates to whittle it down from 6 to 3 or 10 to 5, something like that. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. So once they do that, then they can bring the recommendation back to the board, and the next meeting we have will be, these are the 5 finalists that we have that we're announcing and we're gonna interview, and we can interview that night. Is that correct?
Yes, so you're saying that you would name them the night that they're interviewed.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think you could do that. Some boards, like the night that the subcommittee says we're going to recommend candidate A, B, and C, that night, because the board has decided to interview them, that night the names go public, so people know who's going to be interviewing on the night that you're going to interview.
Yeah, well, as soon as we have the agenda set, they'll be on that. So,
Okay.
3 or 4 days beforehand, that'll be public.
Okay, so their names will be public a few days before they're actually interviewed.
But
Yep,
it
no,
doesn't
that's
have
great.
to be in an open meeting that's announced.
The subcommittee, no, it doesn't have to be because,
Yeah,
so the board would need to authorize the subcommittee to make the decision about who's going to be interviewed by the board. Usually a board in a public meeting, thanks for asking about that. Usually a board in a public meeting will say, we are going to interview candidates A, B, and C. And that motion is made, someone seconds that motion, and then it passes. And then after that motion passes with the A, B, C, etc., then the names are read out loud of who's going to be interviewed. But if you don't have a board meeting in between there and you are authorizing your subcommittee to winnow it down to A, B, and C, then the subcommittee can just decide who's going to be interviewed, tell the board, and it would be posted that way, that these are the people we're interviewing.
all right.
Okay?
Barb, is there anything, do you have like what they can and cannot ask in that subcommittee meeting? So they don't get themselves into any legal problem with asking a question that can't be asked?
Yeah, that's a great point.
How's your How many kids you
How
got?
many kids are you gonna enroll in Royalton?
Yeah, that's great.
I I do have a couple of pages from our full search interview training materials that I could send. Because you don't want to ask about protected classes. I think that's what Christine is asking about. You also cannot require them to move to Royalton. Residency is not something that you can base your decision on. They could live 3 hours away as long as they can still meet the requirements of the contract and the job description. And if you expect them to be very visible and accessible in the community, for example, and that's something that you've told them you want and you expect, they can do it even if they don't live in Royalton. They just have to be held to some kind of standard when it comes to that stuff. But please don't ask them if they're going to move there. Because if you end up hiring someone who told you they're going to move there and you didn't hire someone who said they weren't, then you could get slapped with a discrimination suit around residency. So, but I have the other protected classes. Obviously, if they're married or not, have kids or not, how old they are, all that stuff you cannot ask about. So I'll send you that. Do you want me also to send you a sample posting?
Barb, the other thing would be veterans preference.
Does not apply to a superintendent.
Perfect. Perfect.
Veterans preference does not apply to a superintendent. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to send a sample posting? Because usually, because of the time crunch, it's a pretty simple posting. It's like a very short paragraph. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll send that to everybody. And then the application itself, you said Mandy's the point person for that?
Yes.
Can we tell them to apply? Can we tell them to apply through MSBA and then when you get them, you forward them to Mandy? That way it's a one step. No, they have to apply with us.
Right. For limited search, we're just sort of guiding you, but we're not actually stepping in and doing anything.
So, so we work through Frontline. This is where it gets a little.
You just do it through Frontline, but make it a super simple application. You know, districts that just
you can just see the application because the board doesn't have access to Frontline. So just Mandy, and then Mandy would forward it to the rest.
Yes. I mean, you're probably a confidential employee, though. Also, anyone who is a confidential employee of the board can see those, but we really don't
I think
want.
It should be. Then it's almost going to have to be me.
That's fine. We've had sitting superintendents be the person who's gathering. You know, you're not weighing in on and telling the board who you'd recommend. You're a liaison, but whoever has access to AppleTrack is the person that.
Now double check to ensure about the confidential employee. I think you are, but I just want to double check. Then you can. I just didn't want us to get in trouble with that either.
Yeah, be sure that it is a confidential because it's HR data, but keep the application really, really simple. Sometimes AppleTrack and Frontline, you know, can be really cumbersome. And keep in mind, this is a 1-year position, so don't make them jump through 1,000 hoops. Really what you want from them is their resume.
License.
Can you give us a sample? Can you give us a sample?
Yeah, I'll send a couple to you right now. It's just, I'll send it to you. It also says, we're looking for someone with finance background or strong communication skills. So a little bit of what you're looking for, but keep the application itself so simple. Not even a cover letter. I don't think you need a cover letter. I think if you have their license and their resume, that should be enough. And then I'm not actually sending you anything. I'll tell these 5 or 6 people that they need to go to the district website to apply for the job, but I'll make sure they know that you are going to be collecting them there at the district. If there's a deadline, you know, I wouldn't put the deadline very far out. I think you could put the deadline next week already. Don't give people very long.
We were looking at the 16th.
16th?
Yep.
So 12 days. 12 days. I think that's more than enough time for your deadline. Unless there's a reason the committee can't meet to start looking at it until after that.
If we can get it posted right away, why not? Still gives 8 days, 7-8 days.
I just like to see a week.
So next Friday.
You know,
13th.
Yeah.
And then
we can read out the 16th.
Right.
So
Barb, what about references?
You can ask for that too. Most of them are either the references are on their resume or they have a separate sheet of references. You certainly can ask for that. That's a great idea.
Okay.
One thing I did just do with a district this afternoon is I pretty much know a lot of people who are applying for jobs right now. So I just met with the subcommittee today via Zoom. And they told me the 11 people who'd applied, and I sort of told them my perspective. Because every once in a while, there's someone who is a really good candidate, but when you do a social media sweep or a Google search, you find stuff and it's not necessarily true. So I don't want you to overlook a really good candidate because their Google search, you think it's a red flag. It probably isn't. But then there's also people that have no presence on social media and they're not strong candidates. So I'm happy to provide input if you want. I'm not going to suggest that I do it, but it was helpful today because they almost interviewed someone that I know would be not a great candidate for some reasons they weren't aware of yet. So I can do that, but I don't say I'm going to have to.
A good
Okay,
candidate
that's
at one
up to you.
school isn't a good candidate at every school, though.
True.
You know, we're all
Yep.
different, so.
Yep. Very true. So I'm going to send a sample posting right now to everybody so you can talk about that during the meeting. It'll be there in just a second. And Christine, I'm not including you on these emails. Do you want me to include you on the sample posting?
No, well,
No?
yeah, I mean, maybe just the posting if they agree, because we're the ones that gotta post it. Maybe include
Okay.
Mandy, because we'll have to
Okay.
do the work of posting it.
So do you want Mandy on there too?
Yeah,
And Christine?
yeah.
Okay, let me send that here in just a minute. And you can just see what you want to say. The best idea is to keep it simple. I'd also encourage you to post it that says application deadline, June something, or however you say it, or until filled. We have a district right now that put their application deadline out 2 weeks, but they already found the person they want to hire. So luckily they had or until filled on the deadline so that it people don't have to cry foul. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. I will send you the sample posting right now, and then I'll pull together the protected classes of things you cannot ask in that meeting with people. And I'll send that off. I probably won't get that done tonight, but I'll have that off to the full board by tomorrow. Okay? Okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm here. If you need me to hop back on again, please feel free. So look for this in just a couple minutes, okay?
All right, thanks, Barb. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
So if it closes on the 13th, when do you guys want after that?
16th, I would say.
Well, you're gonna have to meet with whoever is coming up here with the committee,
What's that mean?
right?
What do you mean?
The 13th is when all the applications are gonna come in.
Yep.
So then you're gonna need more than 2 days to read through all the applications, and then the subcommittee is gonna still talk to some of them, right, before we meet and
Right.
suggest, that's all.
Well, I would say the subcommittee meets to go over the applications that we have, and then we can come up with a time and, at that time, right, or not,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Subcommittee meets on the 16th.
Okay,
to go
You could still
over.
schedule your regular, couldn't you? Now, so you know,
Oh, yeah, but
but like after that, like the 18th.
right, yeah, not same date, right.
yep,
Sub-
that's what I was
subcommittee
worried
meets on
about,
16th.
I was thinking board meeting, I'm like, ooh.
No, subcommittee meets 16th and then, yeah, when would be then a board meeting after that.
Because we just have to know the board meeting so we can get it to the paper and get it up on the website, posted.
Right. So. Wednesday, the 18th? Or do you want more time than that?
Okay, let me ask this question. I don't need to feel, but I was thinking about the paper. So we have to get, when we have meetings, we have to get them to the paper the Tuesday before the meeting in order for it to be published in the paper. So I'm just asking, maybe this bar would answer if we don't have to worry about that on these kinds of special meetings. I'm not sure. But if that's the case, if we planned it like the 18th, are we okay to make sure that they know interviews will be scheduled that day? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That whole 3-day piece that you have to have before you schedule a meeting, and then the whole paper piece, how does that come into play? I wonder if we should ask her just to make sure we don't break any laws with that kind of thing.
So it really is,
Would work better. for me.
19th we can't, so
Well,
they-
Oh, I didn't see that, sorry.
But I mean, could you do the 18th? And just repost it?
well, so really the question is, does it have to have names on it when we post it?
I don't
That's
think
the-
so. I think it's just,
Cause otherwise we can post it right now.
That's what I'm wondering, can we just plan on out, and then when you're talking to candidates,
I
you
think-
can,
Last time we did it, Ryan, I think we posted it in the paper that the names would be posted on the website.
That's.
Because we were up against the same paper
'Cause the next thing
deadline
is-
that we were.
you could even post it then saying interviews to be scheduled June 18th or whatever, so the candidates
Yeah.
even know ahead of
I
time.
think that's
to-
what we did last time, to be real honest, is what we put in the newspaper was that the names would be posted on the
On the
website.
Okay.
Yep.
That work for,
So-
I just want
So
So interviews are, so the next board meeting that we are scheduling is gonna be interviews?
and
We're not just announcing it, we're gonna be doing it, right?
yes, both.
So it's gonna be a long meeting, correct?
Depending on how many candidates you have, I suppose.
Yeah.
That you bring through, that's the toughest
and
part.
then you'll wanna work with MSBA to get questions.
Yep, she already said she'll send us
Yeah.
the sample questions. We have to figure those out ourselves, but
So the
But you'll wanna-
16th, the three of us would meet.
Make and start.
So,
If we have
Connect.
12 candidates, we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna try and get it down to 5. And
By
then
Thursday
the 18th,
or Wednesday.
by Wednesday, the 18th, all of us would meet.
Mhm.
And
You
interview.
conduct
Do
interviews
Formal
on,
interviews, yeah.
you conduct interviews on June 18th,
So on the 16th, are we allowed to call some of these candidates and talk to them?
that's what you're gonna do.
that's true.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, that, and the committee, like, you could ask them to come here and meet, or, you know, do a Zoom like this.
right.
I would suggest that you try and keep the questions fairly generic and fairly similar from candidate to candidate.
I think
Yeah,
you just
I
have
would
the same
have to
question.
use
You have to use the same,
Yep,
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
question.
because otherwise you get. a little-
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Getting a sticky wicket.
Okay,
Same.
and I'm just doing this because we'll have to post it, so I just
Yeah.
asking questions, not my business, but we have to do the work, so it's still gonna be 6 p.m. on the 18th. Is that what you guys are planning? How do you wanna run your interviews for 45 minutes? That's
Typical. and-
generally what you can do, so you can schedule them, so you'd have like 3 interviews, let's say you have 3 interviews. You'd have one at 6, one at 6, one at 7, one at 8, you give yourself time in between. One thing that's really important is that, and Barb would probably maybe be here, and if she's not, somebody needs to be here to be that timekeeper. Because if you schedule 45 minutes, they cannot go over 45 minutes. So if they don't get through all the, and you usually have somebody given a time, like, hey, we're 20 minutes left. You have to do that because you can't allow them to have extra time. You have
Or
trouble.
they don't wanna stop sometimes.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So you have to,
You've got 2 minutes.
I like
You're done.
yeah, I
And
mean,
we've got 4 more questions.
yep.
It was really easy on Zoom though, cause I was the administrator and I just hit end.
So here's the other thing that has happened for boards is, let's say you only interview 2 people. And you start at 6 o'clock and they actually get done at 6:35 and the other candidates here, you can go out and have a candidate come and say, hey, we're done a little early. Would you mind coming in early? They will, and then you can keep it moving and get done a little
Right.
quicker. You're gonna want to have somebody here who's greeting the candidates, who's having them in a holding area, because they don't generally see each other. And brings them in and, that kind of thing.
On the
Wonder
18th
what
night,
the-
right?
Yes,
how
on the
Cobb's doing.
18th night, which is probably gonna be Mandy as your greeter,
You can hold them.
Okay,
David, you'll run the
How many
technology.
smart cards you got?
Because it's gonna be open, so anybody can be sitting here in the audience. They cannot ask questions. They cannot talk in this process.
Right.
They do not weigh in. They do not get public comment.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about public. yeah.
Correct. Correct.
But the other candidates aren't allowed to sit in here?
No, they sit there.
Or the public, what keeps them from sitting in here? I'm just saying that.
I've never seen it done before.
Okay,
If they choose to, I don't know if you can stop them, but they
Right.
don't want to. That's not
Right.
their interest. Just like when you're deliberating and you're having a conversation in the public, they don't want to really hear that. They're all going home waiting for the call.
Sure. Is there flexibility if you don't feel the answer, one of the questions to ask a follow-up?
No,
If not, okay.
That's,
because if you ask something any slightly different, then it's we're in the way and all candidates are.
You can ask them to clarify a specific part of the question.
Okay,
Yeah, like,
So like, if they breezed by and you said, hey, what do you know about finances and curriculum? And they only talk about curriculum, like, hey, can you talk a little bit about finances too, please?
okay.
That's
But you can't
best thing you,
steer away from the exact question.
Right.
the other thing you do is you have them sit at the hot seat. And they need to have the questions in front of them. Because that way, in fact, what they started doing now with MSBA is while they're waiting, they have the questions so they can make notes. And it really is better for you because you don't have a surprise, you don't want somebody who just didn't have the surprise attack. You want somebody who can really sit down and think, oh yeah, this is what I've done. And I can really demonstrate what I've done to answer that question. It's really a good way to really understand who your candidate is versus, oh, I'm a really great interviewer on the spot, but doesn't mean I'm good superintendent. Cause I've had that happen where I've interviewed somebody and they were a great interview and doing the work wasn't.
Why are we gonna have a meeting to decide what the questions are?
Right, yeah, so, yeah, I was like wondering if the 16th and the 18th are too smashed together. That's all I was wondering, like what work needs to be done from the 16th to get to the 18th.
Yeah, I think
Well, those
Well,
questions.
the only thing is picking the
together.
folks, cause we can
Okay,
do interview questions tomorrow if we want. You know what I mean? Pick a little.
I don't think I can record that meeting either.
correct. You don't
Just
record
so-
one.
The interview one,
interviews.
the
They don't
interview
record those.
meeting.
Oh, the interview.
Yeah.
No, those aren't recorded.
But they can be online, just not recorded.
I would. It's,
It's weird. Last time we had to be online, so
yeah. I know a lot of boards have chosen not to do that online and just,
I don't think anything should be online.
if people are here, they need to be.
Drag your hand in it,
Yeah.
and sit here with us.
Just make sure that
I
the
agree.
community doesn't weigh in. That's just
I
really
agree.
important. The community can't weigh in.
I'd like to move that we authorize a committee of. We might as well call it the May Superintendent 2025 Committee. Or June, I guess we're in June, I'm a little behind, sorry. And name Ellie, Lucas and Maria to it and give them the authorization to narrow it down to whatever they feel the field should be.
Are we gonna meet here on the 16th?
I,
How are you gonna do it as a conference call? Or
think we should do some sort of Zoom.
Zoom? You want Mandy to set that up, I would assume, like, right, a Google Meet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be good for a kickoff, don't you? I mean, I would like Zoom to be able to see people's mannerisms and interactions versus just a phone call. I mean, that's the point. I mean, the point is to get a feel for the,
So you think the three of us can just stay at home, that's on what we wanna meet together, I think as a group?
I would not meet at home if you have any family member there.
Right,
So. if
that's
you
what I'm saying,
can't-
I think we should meet the
Thank you.
three of us here so that we can,
I think
between talking to them, we can talk amongst
And you don't have
ourselves.
to worry about someone walking in on you
That's right.
by accident.
Yep, I agree.
What time on the 16th?
So you guys are confident you can get them to commit, or you're just gonna call them and out of the blue at 6 o'clock?
No, you'll set it up.
Right, so we're gonna be able to schedule that from the 13th when we close Friday night or whatever we choose as the time by Monday.
well, you have all weekend to do it because you're not talking to them to whittle them down. All you're doing is connecting with them and saying,
But you're just taking all of them and connecting with them then, or are we all gonna get our feedback in? So our feedback means nothing then the first round.
it does. That doesn't mean they're not gonna talk to them.
Right, but if they have to schedule those already on Saturday, how am I gonna get feedback to them and even have a chance to say it?
The feedback doesn't matter for when they talk to them.
But
They're
they're
gonna
gonna,
get a little bit more understanding of the person. And then take what they have and everybody else's feedback and say, okay, so this is.
so they're talking to all of them no matter what?
Yeah,
Okay, I thought you guys were gonna narrow it down before, if we got 10 applicants, you weren't gonna talk to them all.
Nope.
Cause I didn't know if you'd have the time to get them all in if you got that.
So
Got it.
I would think your screening is not gonna be nearly as long as a formal interview. And you're
Right,
getting
Quick,
a
yeah,
flavor.
gotta do that.
Yeah.
So you
like
might have
15 minutes.
4 or 5 questions, getting a
Sure.
feel for
Yep.
them and then move along.
Let's be honest, we're gonna talk like that.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Correct, you're not talking to 10. I also think just make sure when you write down notes, those all get saved in a file and that can be public data the minute the decision's made. The candidate can see their own. So if you don't hire someone, they can come in and see your notes about what you say about them. So I just say that to you all to make sure you don't say something necessarily.
I usually write unflattering things, so if they wanna see it, they get to read it.
I've never known anyone to ask for those notes, but what did I have a 16?
Okay.
We have a motion on the
Is there
floor.
a second?
A second.
All right,
Oh.
So is it best to have one note taker then?
No, I take your own notes, because you get your own feel for the people, and
Don't write anything personal. Or honestly.
just don't say, what a jerk.
I,
Yeah, you can give,
Just instead of saying,
what we did last time was all on Zoom is we were all supposed to bring our notes and hand them into a folder and here when we got around to it. But, you know, how many of them did and stuff. It was weird last time.
but I can tell
Pass
you
the
for
stuff
like
you
myself,
gather.
when I interview, I take notes more about some things they say that make me go highlight, positive or maybe not so positive, and just write it down, just as when then you discuss, you can say, but they said this on question 1, you know, we got it written down to read, because I'm not great, enough memory to.
So we have like a positive, oh, we gotta vote on this motion. Sorry.
so we're still in discussion.
So if you have like a positive and negative attribute list, and you're just taking notes. Can't write things like,
You can write,
old question,
You
or
can
quick
write-
answer question.
you can write whatever you
You
want.
can write.
Even if it's the same, that person
See it.
can see it.
they could request the data, everything is
Yeah,
public.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I usually,
Here.
Yeah.
Here.
yeah,
I do, because I'm like, I think people should be respectful, you know, even when.
Yeah, I'm just being.
But you could definitely write that, like struggled through that question, didn't give me a clear answer.
Yeah.
Those are things for you
Okay.
to remember, so when you guys discuss.
It's more about,
Alright. That's
Like,
nice
what-
today.
what do
the
you
notes
expect
are
to
more
call-
about yourself, but it's just, people don't always know that and say, "Shit, I didn't like their shoes."
Yeah, right. No, okay, I just wanted to know if I could write down.
Should do it.
Really?
You're learning, seeing.
I didn't know shoes
I
was a
had
thing.
a candidate come in flip flops and I had.
I didn't know shoes was a
I did
thing.
not write it down in my notes.
You're able to
Verbally
remember that.
express with the committee how.
That one's not that's a remembering thing,
Yeah.
you'll forget
Yeah.
that.
All right, any other discussion on Randy's motion to have the June 2025 superintendent committee be Lucas, Maria and Ellie? They're authorized to narrow down the field. Which was seconded by John. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
So there goes one. So you're gonna decide on what questions the committee's gonna ask, right? Is it are all of you gonna participate in what those questions are, or just the committee decides?
I think we should all submit in an, well, can we?
It's gonna give you example questions, so you can use those.
Yeah. And I
Just
think,
highlight your favorite,
yeah,
How about if
something?
Highlight your favorite 5 or something.
I can set,
Well, I mean,
why can't we do that together?
Really?
She gets us sample questions, we can go over them right now.
Yep.
there's about 300 of them.
Well, we can pay for one questions.
Yeah.
Maybe could you also share the posting if it came through, because I think it'd be nice to see the example posting if she sent it yet.
Yeah, I got it.
I just don't have like, could you pull it up or do I forget my computer?
I can.
We might as well look at
Hold on.
that while we're here too.
I mean, either way, if there's 300 questions, we're gonna have to go through them at home or here anyways, right?
Yeah, but for the other, you know what I mean, like, what? If we're only looking at 4 or 5 questions, like, what's your best attribute? Why do you think you'd be a good candidate?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, like, we could probably come up with 5 questions here without seeing that.
I agree.
That's
what
what I
I'm saying.
wanted to
Let's just do it. Let's just come up with ones that we feel are good. You guys have been through this before, 3 of you have. What were some questions you thought were good? Write them
Right.
down.
It's such
We
a,
agree on it. That way. the whole
I've been
board-
through a couple of them and it's usually such a, where the district is at, so. You know, if we were looking at a fund balance that was shrinking, it would be a lot of monetary things. If, I don't know that any one line of question is good, you know, I'm sure you should have some fiscal questions and you probably should have some management theory kind of questions in it. You know. Brian probably just named 2 of them that are really good ones, so. Or Brian interviews on a daily basis.
I'd say the second one. Let's switch out the last sentence with the first one. I like the experience in school finance around communication skills better than the relationship building leader with experience with fine, that's just. If we want some kind of wording like that at the end.
I think that's gonna be, the finance for sure is gonna be the biggest thing that, between understanding us and Midstate and how all of that's working together, redoing that too.
So I would say the finance, then communication's always been a big thing on with this board, like when we're talking to Christine, hey, what are you thinking? Like, what can we do about communication, because this and this, needs some improvement, so I think communication has been big.
Yeah, well, it's part of the strategic plan too.
Right. And I would say finance is big, so really just take that last sentence and, because I think second one it talks about just going to the website to apply, which is what we talked about, right? We don't want to call an Ellie, do we, or do we? The first one, the contact.
Are they gonna email them to me?
Yeah, they're going
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
Right, he's talking about what that verbiage says in that first example, we don't want that. We don't want to say that all interested candidates should contact.
Okay.
and this one will just say, if you're interested, contact Mandy Sadler.
Cause it has board chair / HR, so you can use either one,
Sure.
but that.
But I
would be
see, but
Mandy's.
we can use the second one and just change out the bottom sentence, right?
That's what
Yeah.
Lucas is saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you guys wanna do
Remove
that?
that second one,
Yep,
switch that last sentence, exchange it for.
and we'll just put Mandy's contact information in there.
Because it, yeah,
Yep,
Well, actually, they're just gonna
Don't
apply
they
to the
have to go to the
website,
website?
that's all we're gonna say, is
Yeah.
apply through our website.
Just put it in that
Said
one
that,
spot.
Yeah,
It's right
yeah,
there.
we don't have to do anything.
But-
the second one is perfect except the
Yeah.
last sentence.
Perfect.
But if she said that they just need to send their resume, their license and references, they could just email it to me directly instead of going through Frontline.
If we're not asking any other information on Frontline,
And you don't have to worry about somebody else seeing it, not that they would, but if you accidentally gave permissions or whatever, you could do that,
Well, and it's just one less,
right?
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Just email. the
Talking
Because
text.
Frontline isn't like the greatest website to be honest.
If,
Done, simplified.
Are you okay with that, if it goes directly to Mandy and not?
Is Mandy okay with that?
I'm, that's part of my job is being the board's secretary, so yeah. Do you want them emailed to the group as they come in? Or wait until it's all done and send them all to you?
I think as they come in.
As they
Yep.
come in.
and we do
Because
get a little more
yeah.
time to look, yeah, so.
Okay.
We really only have 48 hours.
Yeah, as they come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, your Saturday night shouldn't be spent doing.
And please label them like A, B, C, D, or.
I'm gonna label them so good.
I wanna see like Mississippi, it's like pick a different way to label, like Mississippi and Titan River and.
Yeah, you got a plan.
You already got it figured
Yeah,
out.
just.
Yeah,
Royal.
she's the creative one.
Don't have me.
All right, check, we got that off our list.
Okay, so what about
time
the
on Monday?
questions?
So I'm gonna have.
Tell me, I'm off all day.
We're gonna have a list of questions for the committee
Yep,
and then a list of questions for the group.
yeah, and I would recommend that you use her sample, take her sample questions and look through those for the.
For the bacon, I agree.
Right.
So David, is that something you could do, is just use a Google form and have it open-ended? So have 10 questions on there? Cause I'm assuming we're gonna want about 10 questions.
Yes.
For the full interview, between 7 and 10.
Well, you want 10 to 15.
Yeah, cause I think last time it was like 9 or 10.
I think we did,
Cause they had about 10 minutes for each one of those, and that was, whatever it was.
I think we did 10 last time and I think a couple of them had trouble getting through all 10 questions.
That's on them for not knowing how to
Yeah.
interview.
But
Yeah.
but the
You really
question,
wanna get to know, what is it you wanna know about this candidate? And that's generally why you're in that ballpark of 12 questions. And you wanna give them an opportunity to ask you a question at the end.
so can you put a Google form together that's just 10 text boxes? Number one, text box, what's your first question that you wanna ask? And then all of us can say, copy and paste them all in there. And then you can just roll it as a spreadsheet with all those in there and sort A to Z. From each one of those.
A Google form wouldn't work that way. We could maybe do a spreadsheet and then you each could have a tab at the bottom.
I can't do that, right?
That sounds really confusing to me too.
Okay,
I don't know.
Did we get the?
Or a,
so that's, you're gonna have to email somebody.
Yes.
The thing is, if you do it in a Google form, you just click the link and then you can just type in, I want this question, this question, this question.
If everybody either emails them to me, I'll compile them and then we can go from there.
John said he wants to take care of
That's
that.
fine.
All right.
Perfect.
So we need
Email
to
you
have
or-
Barb send us.
For the
those
final.
sample questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Do we wanna come up with the 4 or 5 for the committee, or you guys want the committee to handle that?
I think they all should know what they are.
Yeah,
I don't wanna put that on just you guys.
Yeah, I agree.
Plus we'll make sure. you know.
Yeah, I think we could come up with 5 questions with you guys.
What were the 2 you just had, Ryan? We'll start with those 2, they were good.
One is just, why do you want this job? And then the second one is, like, what is your background with finances and what are your best attributes handling finances?
I like both of those.
Like you could do it as one, a 2-part question.
Yeah.
What is your background in handling school finance? And what is your best attribute?
Yep.
And I like the first one, just asking why they want the position, honestly. Opens the door, you can get a lot out of here.
Yep.
What is your?
What is your strength?
So financial background and your best financial attribute.
Best attribute or strength?
Anything like that.
so we could do the Google form thing.
We'll figure it out tomorrow.
That's fine. If they don't, that will complicate it, I think.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, I need something to
Just
Yeah.
send,
just let them, just let them.
I'll compile them and then I can send them back and we're gonna have to decide obviously, so we're not gonna have the same 10 questions. But
So you're assuming I have to come up with 10.
I would think, well, we're gonna base these off of the MSBA sheet, right? That's what our plan was, is to pull them off of the MSBA, so.
For the interview.
Correct. For the interview. Yep. We'll be good.
So you need 3 more questions for the committee.
You want something like, what is your leadership style and how would subordinates
Describe you.
describe you? There you go, not reach you. Is that something we want to talk about in this or not?
In your, in when we're feeling.
Yeah, that's, cause that's pretty open ended.
Well, it is, and we're gonna talk about leadership a little bit more during the full review, I think.
So you
But just understanding like, hey, I'm a servant leader, or this is how I check in on my staff, or, whatever that looks like.
Are we locked into these tonight? Cause what if I have some huge epiphany at 5 in the morning when the alarm rings?
Then email it at 7:30. Or write it down. I honestly don't care. If we pick 5 and
You
choose
choose it
that
out,
one,
yeah.
or, whatever,
I mean, I'm saying, like, if I get like a grand revelation, can I present it to the board? Like, hey, what about this question? Do you think this
As
is
long as
better?
you're
Do you
asking
think this is
all,
better
it
than?
doesn't-
So you can,
Just
but
don't
you
want-
only the open meeting law piece.
Yeah, I know it, right, so I don't know.
all. That's,
I guess I could present it to the committee?
yeah, go to the
Yeah.
committee with it. The committee
And
chooses to
ask-
change it if everybody.
Do you
Just
think this
so you don't get
question's
in trouble.
better than, or, do you think we could word it this way versus that way, or? And we can fine tune it, I guess.
That way you don't
General
break open
direction.
meeting law. Or have that serial meeting problem.
So do you typically, are these, isn't a pretty standard interview question, something to do with, greatest like strength, weakness, achievement, failure type? Or hardship or challenge type?
Challenge and how you overcame.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why I had written up challenge. Like within the last 12 months or something like that.
Yeah, right, I'd like to.
In your last position.
Yeah, what the challenge and overcame in your last position.
And what did you learn from it?
Like Ryan said to him, or we said to avoid COVID.
Yeah, don't,
If someone's been there that long, so maybe it should be the last year,
Yeah.
because you know that's what they're gonna say.
Yeah. I think you can get a good feel for somebody if you ask them what they see as a success in their career. I feel like you can get a feel for where their priority lies when they answer that question. Is it lie in staff? Does it lie in accolades? Does it lie in student success?
With them or
Community
with
relations,
others.
right?
Yep.
You know, and how do they define success? Because if their definition of success isn't how we want to see success, then we're gonna be two trains passing in the night.
Then do you wanna do one with communication, like what's your communication style,
Yeah.
or something like that?
Then now you're to six, and some of these are all two parts. So I'm just saying, you might want to save some of those for the big meeting.
Well, right,
Just get
that's
to your-
also what I'm wondering, is, you know, are we gonna ask some of these again in the big meeting, or are we taking this
You can
chance
ask them
to
again.
get
You
15
can ask them
questions out of
again.
these people? You know, like, are we asking these 5 and then not recycling? Cause then we have 10 more pointed questions,
Well,
or are we gonna?
so we're talking about it here, right? Both finance and communication.
So how would you describe your communication style?
Yeah, well, all I was thinking was we do those two. Should we take either success or challenge and just do one of those two questions and save the other one for the regular interview?
That's fine, I don't care.
So
It's a.
number 4, we have the challenge, right?
Yep,
Name a challenge you had in the last year and how you overcame it.
I'd rather hear that in the full interview, I think.
The challenge one?
Yep. I'd rather hear their success because it'll be short succinct with that committee.
So success in the committee one?
I think so, I'm just one. If they're smart, they're gonna take that challenge and make it a success, right?
Well, obviously.
So. But
Where you going?
that's how we understand how good of a communicator they are.
Yeah.
So it'll be better than doing it.
So 4, we want a success.
Instead of a challenge, you guys.
Describe your greatest success at your last,
Asking questions.
in your last position.
A lot of these things.
Okay.
It's, you're on the hot seat, it's not. But they superintendent told us,
You put a caveat in there, what is your greatest success in your, you say last position, aside from COVID? We all succeeded in surviving COVID. I just wanna eliminate COVID as an answer, or safeguard us in some way.
well, I would hope they have a success since then as well, otherwise they have a little bit of an issue with that too.
You would hope.
a lot of questions do say that, tell us in the most recent 12 months.
Okay,
So that
they give you a time frame
You could, yeah.
to reference
for sure.
within.
So that's number 4. We want 5, and we don't have to have 5.
I have written down, why do you want this job? What's your background handling school finances 2, best financial attribute is part 2 of that. What's your leadership style? How would your employees describe you?
That's
What's
3.
your greatest success? Your,
4.
and then what's your communication style?
Yeah, communication's not.
Okay, sure, communication style. Describe your communication style.
Yeah, right.
You still can ask again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you could use the same question.
so 5 questions.
Because you might then say, well, he answered that differently the first time.
You might wanna say with all stakeholders and see what they do with it.
Yeah,
So it could be parents, it could be students, could be staff, could
The
be,
communication style part,
yeah, that's actually a good,
Say that again, how would you word that?
all stakeholders,
yeah,
like,
what's your communication style with all stakeholders?
so then you get a feel for parents, kids. The whole, yeah.
Then in your big group, one thing you could do is look at giving them a scenario or two. You have a very upset parent who blah, 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 and how would they know it?
I'd message them on Team Reach.
You can do
Yeah.
some scenario, but
Big
just if you're
question.
wondering.
Yeah.
So you have 5 questions and you guys are gonna do 15 minutes, they get 3 minutes a question.
It can be whatever it is. All I was getting at is it's not gonna be like an hour, right?
But do these have to be set to standard time too for everybody, or since this is?
And because you have to schedule.
It's just informal.
But do you have to set a time limit is all I'm
Yeah.
asking, or can somebody talk for 10 minutes about their greatest strength and then all of a sudden you're 30 minutes into a call?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're gonna
We'll
wanna,
just give them 2 minutes per question. Here you go, you got 2 minutes in.
And then we'll put like a Jeopardy music on or something. Yeah.
So what time are you wanting these scheduled? Cause we should probably.
I think you should wait until you figure out how many you actually have, go through. And then schedule it then.
I mean, is it gonna be evening? Is it gonna be
Yeah,
afternoon?
what time window works for you guys? Like that?
I'll make
Or
any time
does-
work that week.
I work all day that day, so I can switch whatever time. What time is
Ideal
it?
for me to work, or ideal for me to be between that. Like late afternoon, like 4 to 6, unless that's running into people's dinner hour after.
I'll make it work.
Yeah, I can.
So if something works best for you, just
Yeah.
let us know.
For that Monday, yeah, that, or
6
like that 4 to 6, 4 to 6:30 window would work good for me. Okay. Depends on how many people we have. If we want to start at 4,
And you want them Zoom, yeah?
so.
Cause we can set those up here
Yeah.
and then you guys can be in the conference room. They'll be on Zoom on that room and then have that door shut, not have to worry about
Are we gonna have somebody here that's gonna be able to set?
Mandy. Set it up.
She's gonna. 4 o'clock, you wanna start, right?
That works for you guys.
4 to. Whatever.
See how many
It'll
candidates
depend
you
on
have.
how many.
Yep.
people, yeah.
And then you can kind of decide, well, you know, hey, there's only 3 candidates, we're gonna talk for 45 minutes.
Right,
Just kidding.
I mean, yeah, I get it.
You have a little more time.
And we're gonna do that in the conference room.
Yeah, I think you're best to do it there, you know, the most privacy.
Right.
Right.
Is the bowl gonna be full of M&Ms or?
Not by the end.
It can be.
There's mints in there.
All right, does anybody have an issue with posting?
We're going with the bottom, changing out the last sentence.
Yep.
Perfect, good by me.
Okay, so. When we get back
Gee,
tomorrow,
Last 2 sentences.
when we get
Start.
back tomorrow, we may have more
Start.
questions, so
Yeah,
just know
same.
there may be an email, just so we don't mess up our part. Like, make sure it's on the website, making sure it's a newspaper, you know what I'm saying, like all those, because you're still planning on the. Conducting interviews June 18th, correct? And at 6 p.m., is that what we should say?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, because we'll get that out and posting and make sure it gets where it needs to be. To the newspaper and everything.
Be terrible.
And then you'll email Barb about getting example questions. We'll get those sent out to you. So for the big meeting, the 18th, you can peruse those and come up with your top, whatever you want.
And email those to John.
Email
Yes.
those to John.
I'll
John.
compile them and then we can go from there.
Hopefully
So-
there's just some strong overflow.
That'd be
You know,
great.
overlap.
Last time there wasn't, but there was. Well, there was because it's like, hey, here's 25 financial questions.
Yeah.
So it was by category more so, and then you could pick out like, hey, that is a better question than what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, you can probably narrow it down.
Yep. I think so. So once that comes in, you're gonna send that email out to BCC everybody.
Mhm.
Say, respond back to me by this time with your 10 questions or 12 questions,
Got
or
it.
whatever.
Yep.
All right, so,
Mandy will get them from Dorn, from Barb Dorn. Mandy will then give it to John. John will get it on BCC to everybody else. And then when you get those 10, you can give it to me and she can get them typed up so everybody has them. Or at the night of, I mean.
Do the candidates get them
Every
beforehand?
candidate can have them beforehand, unless you decide you don't wanna do that,
I would rather do that. I'd rather have a well thought out response.
and then prepared and.
You don't like to see them squirm in front of you.
They're gonna squirm anyway.
I know, I'm just kidding.
And then
Maybe
Mandy.
we could do like an
they can-
80-20 on that.
To come in to,
No, like.
to,
Two
Agree with you. I agree. I kind of wish we discussed them a little on an easier question.
Like, I mean, I don't want AI giving us all our answers.
Well, they're.
Well, they only get them the night of,
Once they show up.
No, it's when they're sitting there.
right when they walk
Right.
in. So
Yeah.
I guess they could use their phone quick and Google some answers.
Depending on how early they get.
yeah, GBT.
Check.
But
I
really,
never thought of that.
they
one.
could sit in, and listen to it technically too, so.
Yeah.
Missed opportunity.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, you're right. As long as you're not first, the second or third one could sit in here and listen to it anyways, and they come up with their answers.
One question on 10 questions, how do you want me to narrow them down when I get 30 of them?
Got
Just make my best decision and pick 10?
Could you give themes and then say, in the finance category, that these three,
And then just get them to Mandy and then she'll, or BCC everybody again?
yeah, how much back and forth do you all wanna do?
I'm fine with John picking. them.
I'll try and put them as, I don't care.
You agree to be fair? There you go.
I'll be as fair as I can.
There you go.
And if I have a
Good.
dilemma, I'll BCC
There you
everybody
go.
and send it up.
Yep, perfect.
And I'll get them to Mandy as soon as possible,
Yeah.
and then if there's somebody says, well, this doesn't, you don't like something, let me know. Or too bad.
Question.
No,
There's
So your last
questions.
question is what questions you have for us?
yes, agreed with that.
Yeah,
Yes, we are in. Brett.
and when we conduct that interview. And they say, what kind of questions do you have for us? And they ask a question. Is it the chair? Is that kind of?
Anyone can answer.
Are they, okay,
Oftentimes, like, what the candidates want is to hear from every one of you, because they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Cause it may be that they interview you and they hear something and they're like, I don't wanna do that. It's not a fit for me. And
Right.
so that is an opportunity for them to hear all your voices. The other thing, it's also kind of a time to, where it's a relationship building opportunity too, because you're back and forth, it's a bit more casual, and here's your question. You also have to decide, do you want to go around and each one of you ask a question, or do you want to assign one or two people to ask the questions? And that's been done.
I think everybody has to ask a question.
Okay.
Ask
So that's
questions.
generally where you're either Ellie, well, you won't be here, so Ellie, you'll be in charge of running the interview. So you'll do the welcome, they go around and introduce yourselves, how long you've been on the board, that kind of thing, or whatever, even if that. And then you'll start with question one, explaining to them, oh, we'll go around and each of us will ask you a question. You have this amount of time. This person is monitoring your time to give you a warning when you're halfway through. And then you'll ask the first question, everybody goes around. And then whoever has what questions you have for us, then anybody can answer. And like I said, they like to hear from everybody.
I'll label.
are you
the
gonna be
questions.
online, Ryan?
What's that?
Are you gonna be online?
Put you out of the morning office.
I doubt it.
Oh, that'd
Where are
be
you gonna
nice.
Just put them on.
Spain.
It's helpful, but it's.
Then it's,
They have internet in Spain.
They do. I'll have it, I don't know, I was trying to figure that out and see like what's the time difference and that stuff, and I'm like, that's, no. So what I was gonna ask though is, depending on how that goes. If we have to do a second round of interviews, can we wait until the 23rd to do that? When I'm back?
I agree.
Well, so I'm not gonna try to throw a big kink in the spokes here, but. Do we have to keep it condensed from the 16th to the 18th, or do we wanna begin on the 23rd, or is that too far? Is that too long of a gap?
Too long.
Too
Well,
long of a gap?
Well,
basically, you're gonna
Well-
interview, you might have to interview again, and you have 4 days to hire.
So I-
So call them and do the,
Unless we
You know what I
reach
mean?
out.
And you have to post.
unless we have somebody do a signature, you know, whatever.
you gotta negotiate a contract too. So
We
my,
have time to not,
I
I
would,
would have to go that step to reach out
Yeah.
to somebody if we keep on it.
I don't think you should need to go to a second. Cause it is an interim. I think you should be able to do this in one round, cause you've already got your committee doing an initial vetting. I think you trust that, so you can get it one meeting, get it done, and get your negotiations going, so that they can get the contract signed, and you guys gotta have a special meeting to vote on that contract, so they can start July 1.
And it has
They
to be
can't work
posted in
without-
three days ahead,
The meeting,
yeah.
yeah, so that's why I say, I just think you want that one, you've got your committee doing their work.
What happens on that deal if we don't make the paper? Is that
Well,
allowed?
that's why I'm gonna put that in now, because you said that the link will be posted on the website. So what I was thinking is we'll post the date next week, so it hits the paper on Tuesday. So it notifies at the June 18th date, and that the candidates' names will be posted on the website, like you said, and then we're good with the paper.
Can we do contract negotiations that night?
You could start
Yeah.
that for sure.
Yeah, cause when we did that, Tara called right afterwards and said this, and then this is what we're thinking.
Yeah,
Well, she sent it to me.
Could we decide when the contract meeting will be and just post it now? Or like
There's
send
not a
it to the
meeting for
paper?
that. They'll just have Ellie, you'll be back too, so you can even do it together, but you guys will do
that,
that.
that doesn't have to be done in a meeting.
Well, you're gonna
Not
have
the
to-
negotiations, the approval,
the approval.
Approval and have-
but
But are you
we
guys,
don't know
gonna-
how long it's gonna take to get there.
do you have set parameters on what you want? Cause you need to be thinking about your salary.
We have to go through the next closed negotiation strategies before we can talk through that. And then figure out. Those who are doing that can figure that out.
So June 9th, we have to put it closed.
We have that.
It's already on.
Yeah,
So you're gonna talk about the superintendent negotiation?
no, because
Or
but
you
we're gonna
gonna,
talk about just standard negotiation and what we're gonna do. And then that committee can take that input from what the board says, what we wanna do, and look at that contract and figure out what they wanna do. Right, because all the committees are gonna do basically the approval, bring back to the board that's within those parameters. Right,
Oh. The superintendent committee would
Yep.
be responsible for that between,
have you
Wait.
done a comparison among superintendents in your area? I think that your candidates are all sitting superintendents or have been recently. So you'll wanna look at the salaries of the people around us in similar sized districts, make sure you're not too far away.
well, and the thing is, it's a personal thing. Especially for an interim, right? I do need insurance, I don't need insurance, well, that changes all kinds of stuff in the contract, pay wise, they could. Or I care about my 403B, or I don't want anything to go there, and I want it just to be straight up one. I think that has to inform some of it.
and that all has to take place on the 18th.
No, that happens
Right.
once we pick a candidate and say, yes, we're gonna do this, we negotiate that, and then before June 30th, basically, we have to approve it.
So you'll have a special meeting to
Yep.
approve the contract.
But the committee will do the work between 18th and 30th.
It shouldn't be too much, well, unless you have a problem coming to it.
So tentatively, we should just plan that special meeting. Is
You know,
gonna be the 30th or before that? To approve, like the approval of contract. That
What happens if we schedule one and don't have it?
No, I'm just was asking people's calendars, like ballparking, like we don't.
We say we could schedule it, but then what if we?
Schedule, then you're
got
gonna
there,
cancel.
Then we could cancel.
Yeah,
Maybe we should get it scheduled so that it can. So that we're following. All the
We'll have to
posting
get that
laws and all that
out.
stuff.
yeah, so. When do you want that?
So we're gonna discuss the superintendent contract. Negotiation, we're gonna have a closed meeting for that on the 9th?
No, we
No,
are having a negotiation strategy closed session on the night.
okay,
So we met with the teachers and heard
Yep.
what they're asking,
Yep.
we can talk through some of that and what they're looking at and, how we want to do it as a board and what we want to stay at and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then, once we all agree on that, then we can start doing the rest of the negotiations, really. For everybody else too, but the superintendent will be one of them.
superintendent,
How about like the 26th?
Works for me.
It's a special meeting?
Yep, special meeting to approve contract.
All right, how? I'm supposed to be down that night. Is that a long meeting?
That should be about 5 minutes.
Yeah, you just need to trust your committee.
Sure. Cause you'll all see it in board book, that'll be uploaded in there, so you'll be able to read through it and whatever else, you know what I mean?
But if you trust your committee, then.
right,
You wanna use it or move it up, or maybe they can come at earlier time instead of 6.
No, that's fine.
So it's gonna be the 26th.
It doesn't have to be the 26th, I'm just.
No, that works well for me.
And it gives that time, if they're Well, I don't know who your applicants would be. They're currently working someplace, they gotta put a resignation in.
Probably trying to use their days up.
So June 26th, you're saying?
Correct.
What time?
6? That work for you, Maria?
Okay, we'll make sure that gets to the paper.
I didn't bring my other phone, so I'm sure we'll put it there. I have something every other night that month.
Month of June is filling up, guys.
Yes, it's full.
Okay, anything else? Questions,
We
comments?
gave authorization to the committee.
Yep.
We're gonna come up with questions. I think we got our i's crossed and t's dotted.
All right. Ellie?
Good.
Yeah, shall someone on the committee formalize these 5 questions we're gonna ask and email them to the group? Or just we're going with what we noted and run?
That's up to you guys.
You should probably formalize it, because then it's the exact same question for all the people. Because if you have different wordage, you'll write it differently.
If you
Yeah.
email it to Mandy, she can have it printed for you too,
Yeah.
if you wanna
Yep.
take notes on that in paper, you know, she got, how many of her candidates she had. she'll
Which
give you
is
that.
great, because then you could just leave it here.
Yep.
And then you can
You
head
don't have
back
to
out
take
later.
it, yeah, and you don't have to worry about it being on a, somebody seeing.
Yeah, and you guys like,
Okay.
don't do any of this communication of this stuff on your phones. Use your skill computer, because
Right.
if somebody wanted
Yeah.
to ask how you communicated and you told them you're using your phone, then they can be in your phone, so. Unless you're okay with that, but I'm really not, so,
I've only, yeah,
yep,
I
I
just
just.
will email them, yeah.
Or that.
Alright, so do you want me to do that?
Yes.
Thanks, Maria.
Volunteer.
It's your idea.
It was actually a great idea.
That's the,
Got it.
that's the punishment for having a great idea.
Okay.
Right up to the school board, we punish success.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Focus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You're-
Aye, aye, aye.